Welcome to Healing Generations, a podcast creating a dialogue uplifting the importance of healing, strengthening, and supporting our communities, and that addresses the disparities and inequities in communities of color. Healing Generations is brought to you by the Healing Generations Institute, a collaborative initiative of the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Elders. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our new releases.
Well, we say welcome. This is Jerry Teo with the Healing Generations Institute, and we'd like to welcome you to another dialogue, another journey, another podcast in which we explore the dimensions of how our ancestors have been able to bring that healing generations medicines from so many generations, and at the same time explore the trauma that they had to experience and that we are still struggling with today. But it's really about searching for that balance, for that healing, for that interconnectedness of peace and well-being among all people. And so thank you for joining us today. We thank you for allowing us to be part of your life today. And I want to begin by thanking the Creator and thanking the ancestors. And maybe we can just take a deep breath to just acknowledge them, and because their breath really comes through us as well, and we acknowledge your ancestors, and some of you, come from several roots, and that's beautiful. Bring all of them bring all the grandmas and grandpas in, bring them all in together that way. We want to just acknowledge, wherever you're at on your land, the people of the land, just acknowledge them, but not only acknowledge them, let's bring in their stories too, even in the sense of just acknowledging and holding them as we speak today. And as we begin today, I'm just so happy today that we have two people here that I consider, family, wonderful colleagues, just great wisdom keepers and leaders in their community, and just good people. You know how you know who good people are. They're just good people. You say, well, tell me, they say, this is a good dude, man. Or, this is a good person. These are good people right here. And behind them they have so much experience and credentials, if you want the formal credentials, but also just a lot of experience in working and loving and healing and embracing causes and people's pain, but also guiding healing. And today, we're really blessed to have with us Mr. Charles Tucker and Susan Glisson, who are both co-founders and partners of Sustainable Equity. And I'm going to let them share a little bit about what that is, but I want to welcome you, Charles and Susan, and give you an opportunity to greet the audience today. Susan, maybe you can start.
Hey, y'all. Jerry, such a delight and honor to be with you. We consider you family as well, and you make us better by letting us hang out with you. So glad to be with you. Always glad to be with my partner, Charles, and looking forward to a enriching, inspiring conversation.
Charles.
Hey, I'm Charles Tucker, partner with Susan Glisson and humble student of Jerry Teo. I think the greatest thing I can say right now, if I could say it would be profound, is that I've finally gotten old enough to know when someone's trying to teach me something by example, as opposed to beating me over the head with it. The ability to look at a person and say, that's a good man, or it's a good woman, or that's a cool old dude, or whatever. But to go beyond that and see that's experience, that's wisdom. That's something I need to take into myself. That's something that'll make me a better human being. And, you learn that, sad to say, from snowball experience. You pay the price for it. And if you're smart, you learn from it. So.
Thank you, Charles. Yeah, those experiences, that really, at the time when we're going through them, we're kind of, wondering, sometimes we even say, God, why you do this? Why are you sending us through this? What's going on here? But you realize if you can surrender and really embrace that journey, that there's some teachings and some medicine there that can really fortify you and help you as you go on. So I'd like to start there and maybe ask you, Charles, to share a little bit about you and your journey, your people, where you come from, and a little bit about, how Charles Tucker got here, to where he's at today.
if I had a dime for every time I asked myself, how did I wind up here? I'd be a rich man. But I'm from rural Mississippi, actually. I'm from last of a generation. I grew up in plantation housing on a cotton plantation and just outside of Cary, Mississippi, in the Mississippi Delta. And for those of you who are music fans, that's where the Delta Blues came from. And that's the Delta Blues itself is a whole show on learned experience. But I started there. My father drove tractor, ran, and worked the plantation farm. We stayed there until such time as he passed away. And we had to move off it because you had to have somebody working there to stay in plantation housing. So I lived in the quarters, which is what they call the place where Black folk live. And they lived on we had a little postage stamp size lot that my grandfather had bought and lived there. I'm one of the first guys, I think I'm the first guy in my family to go to college. Not playing football, I was too small at the time and, wasn't in the Army. I actually went on a scholarship, which surprised everybody because that's something black guys didn't do. You grew up and you worked on a plantation. You drove a tractor or a combine or a cotton picker, and you did all of that kind of manual labor. If you were lucky, you'd actually learn a trade like carpentry or plumbing or something like that. But I'm old enough to remember when they paved the road in front of the trailer that we lived in. At first, it was dirt, then it was gravel, then it was asphalt later on. Just as I was leaving, I remember when there was like one phone in the whole area, and everybody walked down there to use the phone. So if somebody came and said you had a phone call, somebody had died. It was that kind of emergency. And then I remember the party lines where you had a ring, and the little old folks would listen to the party line and everybody else's conversation, so they'd have something to talk about at church. So I grew up from there, from a family that was mostly, we used to say it was 3 branches of my family: hellraisers, soul savers, and those just trying to keep their head above water. So I am not one of the clergy. I did my hellraising when I was a lot younger, and now I'm just trying to keep my head above water. So just trotting along.
That's right, yes. Susan, share a little bit about your early start.
So I come from June Glisson, June Partridge Glisson, and Jean was the baby of 3 and the only girl. And my folks waited for 10 years for the baby girl to come along that they were hoping for. So when I got here, I was ridiculously spoiled. I did not really walk or talk till I was 18 months old, which is late for a baby, because I was carried everywhere I wanted to go. And if I wanted something, I just pointed to it, and it was given to me. And in my selfish moments, I wonder why life is still not like that. But of course, we live in the world with other human beings, and we're made better with them. So I finally learned I had to do some things on my own. And right about the time I was learning that, my father passed away of a sudden heart attack. I was 4.5 years old. And he was really the light of my life. And so very early, as Charles, learning to navigate what it feels like to have a great loss and not know how to process it, not know how to manage your emotions, not know how to blame yourself when bad things happen in the world. And my mama, I like to quote Rick Bragg, the writer from the South who came from a pretty traumatized background and who went on to become a successful journalist and Pulitzer Prize winning writer. And he was asked one time how he came from the background he came from to the success that he had today. And he said, I walked up my mama's backbone. And that's how I feel. I walked up my mama's backbone. I am descended on both sides of my family from people who fought for the Confederacy and from people who revered it so much that they named their children for so-called Confederate heroes. My mother's father was named for Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy. On my father's side, equally, folks named for Confederate personalities. But that stopped with my parents. They did not pass that valorization down to us. And in fact, in 1977, my mother sat me down at the only TV in our house and made me watch Roots with her because she thought I needed to know what the real history was that we had inherited. And I should say, I didn't learn that at school. I learned it because my mama made sure that I learned it. And so because of that home education, it made me look out for ways to try to repair the damage that my ancestors had done. And I began to look for ways that someone who looked like me, a white person, could walk a better path than the people who had walked the path before me. And I found movement people. I found people like you, and I found people like Charles, and I found people like Ella Baker, who I read about, and I found people like Chuck McDew, who was the first chair of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and Connie Curry and Will Campbell, people that were part of the movement in the 60s and 70s, and who taught me, took pity on me, and took me under their wing and taught me some things that I try to use now.
Wow. Well, thank you both. And when you look back at that journey, I mean, we all of us do our work if we really want to bring the best to the people. But sometimes we forget those lessons, and those tough lessons, the ones that kind of stick with you, and only come up, when other situations like that rear their heads again, And I wonder if you could share, some of those lessons. And I mean, you already began, Susan, talking a little bit about, that journey and some of the lessons. But I wonder if we could talk a little bit about that. What are those lessons or those teachings that really gave you the fortitude to do the work that you do today?
Well, in addition to losing my father, I've also now lost both of my brothers very early. My oldest brother died of a heart attack in 2006, and my second brother also died of a heart attack in 2013. And I know when those moments happen, when life lays you low, it was easy to feel it was something unique to me, and to be so incapacitated that I didn't really want to leave the house. And then some wisdom came. Frankly, it came through a TV show that I was watching that I normally never watch, that had a character that had suffered a devastating loss, and who also wanted to sort of crawl into a cave and not come out. And what I heard, what I received was that I'm grateful that I had these people in my life for the time that I had them in my life. And now I'm going to live my life reflecting that they lived in mine. So being grateful for moments that feel too fleeting, that still bring joy, remembering the profound joy that comes from that deep connection with other human beings, and knowing that that's the medicine. So when there's loss, to be grateful for the connection. When there's hurt, to seek out connection. I love the work of Margaret Wheatley, and she talks about for every trauma, community is the answer. Making sure that we don't feel like we're on this journey alone, that we need each other. And we need folks not just who are part of our born cultural group. We need all of us, because there's medicine in all of our cultures, and we need all of it to become the best that we can become.
But specifically on this road, because I know your work is really about racial healing and racial equity and justice, and I'm sure as a white woman you've been challenged along the way. I'm sure you're still challenged, right? Tell me a little bit about those challenges and what has allowed you, in spite of the challenges, to continue to persevere.
So initially, I really didn't see a role for me to play, because what I initially learned about people who fought for human rights and for beloved community were African American activists who were deeply inspiring, right? The Dr. Kings and the Ella Bakers and the folks in SNCC. And so it helped to actually meet someone who looked like me, who was active in fighting racism and in trying to create a beloved community. So I met that person when I was 17 years old, as a freshman in college. His name was Joe Hendricks, and he was a professor at Mercer University, where I went to undergrad. And he had really made the university desegregate before it was forced to do so by the courts. And he had been kind of the moral compass for that university community for many, many decades. And he really took me under his wing. I'd already mentioned that I, lost my father, and so he really became a father figure to me. Kind of adopted me. He called me baby puppy, and he showed me that white folks not only could, but they should be involved in the repair that our ancestors and our contemporaries continue to engage in. And so having an example, having a model of someone who showed me that it was possible was the first important thing. But then, of course, meeting folks who understandably saw me walking in the door first and didn't know me yet and were suspicious. There'd been too many people who look like me who act like they're there to save people or believe they have the ability to save other people, or that they're supposed to be the ones in charge, or they haven't done their own work. And so I've certainly walked into spaces where folks were not welcoming of me being there. But what I understood was that it wasn't personal to me, that it was because of wounds that had been inflicted by other people, and that part of my learning journey and part of my responsibility is to stay, is to work hard, to learn, to listen, and to show that I'm going to be there even when it's hard, that I'm not going to walk away when my feelings get hurt, that we don't have time for that because there's too much damage to repair.
Wow. Yeah. And it's definitely a challenge, I know, because I've been in those situations too, where your heart and your spirit wants to do good, but there's a history to contend with, And Charles, I want to invite you to share, because I'll tell you, I had an experience. This was a number of years ago, but I had an experience in Mississippi. I went to speak at a conference, and we finished the conference, and then an African American friend of mine, we were gonna hang out, and I said, well, let's go get something to eat. He says, well, we only got about an hour, and I said, why? It's because it's gonna get dark. And I'm saying, what? He says, well, yeah, in this neighborhood, we really shouldn't be out. And I'm saying, and I understand the history, and this has been my life, but to bring it home that directly, that, this professor, this PhD is saying, you know what, I don't know if we should be out in this neighborhood. If we go by my house, okay, but in this neighborhood, I don't know. There's been some stuff that's happening. And, I see you and feel you and hear the gentleness and the strength in you. And it makes me wonder how you deal and dealt with that and still have such a gentle, strong spirit. Can you talk a little bit about that journey? Because obviously for you to still be in this with such a beautiful spirit is, you've had to pull real deep. So can you share a little about that?
Remember I mentioned something about snowball experience. Oh, man, I appreciate that. There are a lot of lines that we walk when you try to do this work. If you're nice, you're too nice. You're giving somebody excuse, or you're giving somebody a pass. If you're mad, then you're an angry black man. Or you're, some people say you're not mad enough. Some people say you're too confrontational. So there's all these different lines that everybody else tends to draw for you. But ultimately, you have to learn to figure out where your spirit lies and to accept your own warts and your own scars and not say, my job is to inflict my pain on somebody else. And I guess the way I lost a lot of people in my time. And I think learning to deal with that and learning that being angry about it doesn't change anything. Some people are motivated by anger, true enough. And sometimes that motivates them. It gives them just enough of a kick in the butt that they can do some things. But anger is a very corrosive thing. And anger does not heal. It continues to get into that wound and it's like infection. And the more you feed that infection, the more of your body and your spirit it consumes. I lost my dad when I was 6 years old. And I was mad for a good 6 or 7 or 8, 9, 10 years. But my anger never brought him back. It never brought him back. And I lived through growing up in an abusive household because my mom, in working through those stages of grief, never got past the anger. So I knew firsthand what anger could do to a person. And usually you blame yourself as a kid. You know, did I do something wrong that my dad died? Did I do something wrong that my mom hates me? You know, it took me, I was in my 40s when I realized she was just coping the best she could. Mm-hmm. But up until that time, you know, that anger was gnawing and gnawing. And I was fortunate in that her brother, my Uncle George, who passed away about 10 years ago or so, he wasn't there, but he was close enough to where he could tell me that this isn't normal. This is not the way to be. He was a veteran of the Korean War. He had been in race riots on a troop ship where there was no place to run. You were in the middle of the ocean, you know, and he would tell me these stories about how he dealt with the stuff that he was confronted with in Korea in the United States Army. And he would tell me, what do you think about this? You know, he would ask me, he would actually talk to me because he could see what I was going through. And he could see where I was headed. And he says, I want you to think about this, as opposed to, yeah, you know, everybody's against you and all this kind of stuff. He told me something that has always stuck with me. You can't control what other people do, but you can control what you do in response to it. Now, ask yourself if what you're doing in response is harming them or it's harming you. And when you're a kid, that's the last thing you want to hear. That is the absolute last thing you want to hear. Yep. You know, you're like, it's their fault and I'm going to be mad at them. And he was like, no. He says, there are people out there who believe that and look at where they are. Are they any happier? Are they any healthier? You know, are they trying to medicate this with what they're buying in a little ergonomically shaped bottle that they have in the back pocket? And if they're treating it that way, is it making them a better person? You know, how's their family reacting to it? And like I said, a third of my family was clergy, you know, Baptist preachers and stuff. And I used to remember going to talk with people, and they were talking through their anger, they were talking through their loss, and they were talking through their pain. And as I sat there as a kid listening to this, I'm thinking, I couldn't wait to, you know, be grown so I wouldn't have to feel this ache. I wouldn't have to feel this emptiness because I thought you would just grow out of it automatically. And then there were these grown people, just as toe up as I was. And my grandfather would say, you know, and I was terrified of my grandfather. You know, he had that voice that sounded like thunder rolling across a mountaintop. You know, he cut loose, you know, kids all over the place would freeze. He was just that dangerous sounding. And but he would say, hating has never healed anything. I found out later that he had lived that. He had been one of the most feared guys in the county when I was growing up. His father was worse. And when he found religion, he found the Lord and all that, he had to deal with a lot of his own baggage. And he kept that struggle away from most people. But every now and then he would let it slip. And I would look at him and I'd go, man, if this show a Big Daddy, it can tear up anybody, you know.
Yeah.
So I learned at some point that I had to sit with my own pain. And I say, this is what hurt me. What can I do to heal? And I would talk to people and folks was like, you know, How come you're not mad? How come you're not angry? How come you're not more militant? I said, I look at life. What do I have to do to take care of my family? What do I have to do to take care of me, to move things forward? And what I determined was this: the strongest man I ever met was the softest spoken, because he didn't have anything to prove. He had his priorities set in such a way that he did that work on himself. And he let his life he led be the example for his kids, and to be example for the people he worked with. Now, it's not that he set out to be an example. It's just how it works out. He used to tell me, you never know who you inspire. You never know whose example you are. You may never even recognize that person, but they see how you dealt with something and they go, okay, I can do this. I can get through this. There's a way that I can go. And that's the hard lesson. That's the hard lesson, is to see the medicine where it is, because it's not always labeled.
Yeah. So many things as you're talking just triggered for me right there, because, I grew up in Compton, and I remember on Sundays we get ready to go to church. And, we put our best clothes on and go to church. And my best friend Tyrone, we'd play. And initially, I said, I'm going to go to church. When we come back, we'll play. He said, no, I don't come back till tonight. I said, what? I said, you going to church? He says, yeah, but, well, okay. We'll, after church. He says, no, we go to church till nighttime. I said, what? It's only like 9:00 now. How you going to go to church for so long? He says, well, we just stay at church. And I didn't understand that. I truly didn't understand. Why do you got to go pray for so long, Until, much later did I understand that was the safest place, that was the one time a week Tyrone's family could feel safe, that people loved him and acknowledged him, and what I began to understand is during that Sunday, it was like they got inoculated, they got blessed, they got stored up, they got all that medicine and spirit in them to get ready to deal with the week, and that is that medicine of our culture, of our people, that in spite of the historical, genocide and humiliation and torture that our people have been through, that you or Charles Tucker can sit here as a gentle man, with spirit, understanding, and you have a great understanding of the injustice that has gone on and continues to go on, but nevertheless you pull not from your wounded self, but from your sacred self, the sacred self that your people have left for you that way, and so I just, for both of you, I just want to appreciate you that way. And, and I know that all of those teachings and lessons, and we could go on forever talking about it, but have really fueled the work that you're doing. And so I wonder, if you could just talk about the work that you're doing, or you have been doing. And Susan, maybe you can begin talking about the work that you're doing now, and why that's so important to you.
Thank you, Jerry. I love the conversation that you and Charles are having. He is so special. You're both so special. Charles and I are getting to do some really inspiring work for us, inspiring because of the people that we're getting to work with. We're working in spaces that have become familiar to us, which is to work with people who are grappling with the histories of racial violence, sometimes historic, notorious sites of racial violence. So we're working with folks over in the Mississippi Delta who have been for a while, trying to figure out ways to live in the aftermath of the Emmett Till murder, what it means to try to repair that, and what it means to understand that the conditions that enabled that murder to occur and the murderers to get away with that have not gone away, that those conditions still exist in the Mississippi Delta, they still exist in our country, and it's long past time for us to figure out how to repair that and change the conditions so that children especially don't die because of the way they look. So we're working with folks there, and we've been there for a while, and we're working with descendants from a well-known historic plantation that will soon become public, but sort of essential figure in the Civil War, owned a plantation, and now the descendants of that plantation, both from the owner side and the enslaved side, are coming together to figure out a new way to define family that's not mediated by economics or labor relations, but because of beloved community, they're creating a quilt that looks very different from the one that they inherited. We're reweaving a new quilt. So we're dealing in places. We use this quote all the time that the most sacred places on earth are those where ancient hatreds have been transformed into present loves. And because we live in Mississippi, sadly, there's ample opportunity. There are plenty of places in Mississippi that have those notorious racially violent histories. And so we began our work in those places, and we learned together with the community leaders in those places. And so those are the places where we have tended to be called to work. And the idea, of course, is that if you can find connection, if you can find healing in those places, then one would presume you can find it anywhere. That was the mantra of the student workers in SNCC, that we must go to Mississippi if it's supposed to be the worst place. If you can heal the worst place, then you can heal anywhere. So I try to remember, Charles and I talk about this all the time, that whenever we get tired and whenever we get weary, whenever we might want to leave the state, I'm reminded of a saying that Chuck McDee taught me. He said, Mississippi is the movement's Broadway. And when you're working in Broadway, you don't leave. It gives you a platform that can help everywhere else, right? The rest of the country thinks of Mississippi as this other country, but what they need to realize is that when you're looking at Mississippi, you're looking in the mirror. They need to face that and do the work right there where it's hard.
That's the thing about it. And I use a lot of movie references when I talk. There was this book, and later on a movie called The Picture of Dorian Gray. In the movie, the premise was this man had a painting that a friend of his made. He wished that the painting would age instead of him. And he did it in front of the statue of an Egyptian cat goddess. And he just said it, off the cuff. But what happened was he didn't age. The painting did. But also every evil thing he did showed on that painting. For the United States of America, for a lot of people, Mississippi is that painting. All of the bad things about it, they can convince themselves they're beautiful and constant. But Mississippi showed that ugly side. And as long as Mississippi was way over there, out of the way, they didn't have to deal with their own issues. They didn't have to deal with their mess. It was always, well, we're not as bad as Mississippi. Oh, well, that's something that happens in Mississippi. It doesn't happen in LA. It doesn't happen in New York. It doesn't happen in Chicago. I mean, the worst black-white race riot in American history happened in New York. Most people don't realize that. But it's a convenient scapegoat to keep from having to deal with their own mess. They say, well, at least we're not as bad in Mississippi. Once I think we were in Iowa, and we were working with a group, and fellow, in all honesty, he now without a wink and a nudge, he said, well, I understand why it's important that you do the kind of work that you do in Mississippi, but we don't have that problem here in Iowa. Well, come to find out, the reason they didn't have it in Iowa is because it was the town he grew up in was a sundown town. They actually had a billboard that said if you were black and caught in this area after sundown, it was not going to be good for you. And he didn't believe us. He went and talked to his dad. His dad's like, oh, yeah, I remember that sign. It's right over yonder. Right over yonder. He's all stunned. But the fact is, we all have warts. We all have that ugly side that we have to deal with. Some people deal with it. Some people scapegoat it and put it someplace else. Mississippi was that scapegoat for a lot of people. And it still remains that way. It's easy to say in another town, they'll always say, well, on that side of the tracks, or those people up on, we're not like the folks over in Compton, we're over in Simi Valley or something like that. That stuff never happens over here. It's all a mechanism for people not to deal with that part of them that, in a way, terrifies. It also challenges their notion of who they are as people, as spiritual beings, as good people. The wisest good man acknowledges the fact that he has not so good moments. The one who says he's never sinned is the one who's lying not only to the Lord, but to himself. And he ain't fooling the Lord. And in truth, he's not fooling himself. Mm-hmm. But you said something a minute ago that bears going back to. You were talking to your buddy about going to church on Sunday, and your folks stayed in church. For a lot of people, that was the only place they could express their pain. That's why the services took to, like any kid, I'm like, we've been at church 3 hours. I'm hungry. Yeah, I hate these shoes. I want to go play. But that was a place for those adults who, in a society that did not want to hear about how fair their life was, that what pain they were in, what pain they felt. This was the place that they could let that guard down, and they would wail and they would sing and they would do anything, because that was that one opportunity to just get rid of all of that animus and all of that pain and all of that hurt. People like gospel music, whooping and hollering and yelling and screaming. That's pain. And if you don't get it out some way, it's going to find its way out another. And I guarantee you, if you don't control how it comes out, it's going to make its own way, and it's not going to be pretty. So you had people who self-medicated. They drank, or they smoked, they went out and picked fights on the weekend, or they did. That's that anger and that pain forcing its way out. They may beat their kids or yell at their wives or whatever. It's going to come out. So for a lot of people, going to church and singing Amazing Grace or singing Long Meter, which we did here, and that's when, you would take a note and you would say one word, and that word lasts 15 minutes. And you're just singing. But it's pulling that pain out. It's like, Lord, only you know my pain. Only you care to hear it. I have to hold this in from 9 to 5 every day when I'm not treated like a human being, when I'm treated like a lesser than, like I'm treated like an animal, that I'm treated like I don't matter. I hurt, Lord. Here's my pain. Take this away from me so that I can be a better person. Take this away from me so I can sleep at night. Take this away from me so that I could love my family and that I would be deserving of the love that they have for me. And Lord, please don't let me be a bad example to my children. Wow. Services lasted forever, but they served a purpose.
Yeah. What our ancestors understood, and now people are talking about, the somatic impact of racism. Our people knew that. We knew. People saying, well, it's important to be trauma informed. We're going to make it. We were trauma informed since we were little. We knew about our trauma. Shit. We were informed about trauma and everybody else's trauma too. And we felt it in our bodies, and it affected us physiologically. And, that's why, during COVID, why so many, of our people suffered, because the inflammation of being, in fear, of being in pain, of being in trauma that affects your body, affects your heart, your respiratory system, affects everything, then makes you vulnerable. And so what people don't understand is that racism affects your overall health. And has affected us and continues to affect us. And so our people had ways of healing. The singing, the chanting, the moving are all somatic ways of, let me get this out. Let me get this toxicity out. Let me rebalance. Let me reconnect with the sacredness that I feel, so a song can really reverberate to the sacredness in your body. And it moves out that hate that you've been fed, and many people don't understand, that our ways of praying, our ways of being, and even in the street, even on the neighborhood, people get upset because, neighbors are playing the music loud and it goes on for a long time. Well, That's our way
Yeah.
sometimes of creating a different vibration that is, that we don't feel when we're in the world that we're in, So I think that we are now recognizing, and we need to lift up that, we have the healing medicine. Our people know what to do. Just, we just need to be able to get acknowledged. And, people are talking about critical race theory. Really, it's about truth, right? We just want to say the truth. And what I have learned from my ancestors is the first step to healing is truth.
Oh, yeah.
If you cannot recognize the truth, then you're not going to really heal. You're not going to really heal that way. I really appreciate both of you, and we could maybe we will set up another session, because there's so much here that we could talk about and really explore. But for today, I want to close this out with asking each of you to share, some counsel, some advice, a teaching that you would want to share with other people, that struggle with that essence of people not valuing you, people not recognizing you, people not respecting you. What have you learned in your journey that you can share with others, as you do your work and live your lives? What kind of advice would you give that next generation? Susan?
Y'all's conversation is, I've been taking notes because it's helped give some form to something I've been wrestling with. I think I want to speak specifically to the folks who look like me, because part of what whiteness does is that it tries to make you not feel. Because if you feel, then you can become empathetic. If you feel, then you can begin to understand that you're not the only person that suffers loss, that other people suffer loss, and that sometimes maybe even the system that advantages you is the cause of that loss, and you want to do something about it. So I like to talk about how, that word kumbaya gets thrown around. Folks will say, dismiss sometimes the kind of work that we do as kumbaya, that it's just superficial, touchy-feely, new age, not to dismiss those terms, but in fact, the tradition from which that word comes is the tradition that you and Charles have been talking about, of lament, of crying out to the Lord to be heard in the midst of one's suffering, especially in the midst of suffering that is caused by racism and systems of oppression. That was a song, a lament, a dirge to cry out and share that pain. And expecting to be heard, because expecting that one lived in a space where there was justice, and there was mercy and there was compassion, and that sense of that, the profound power of lament and power of connection and power of expectation of justice was what animated the movement. It's what animated white kids to say that they wanted to come to Mississippi after 3 civil rights workers were killed in Mississippi. Vincent Harding tells the story about those kids being told that these 3 civil rights workers were missing, and they were certainly presumed to be dead, to have been murdered. And they were given the opportunity, these volunteers, to decide whether or not they wanted to continue on with their journey to Mississippi, because it was a big deal. There was, certainly now the knowledge that you might be killed if you continued on to Mississippi. And civil rights activists passed along that news and invited the students to go and call their parents to meet with each other to decide if they wanted to continue that journey. And they all went outside, and Vincent Harding talks about walking outside and how these volunteers had gotten into little clusters, little circles of people, and they had held tight to each other, and they were all singing Kumbaya. They were singing, "Come by here, Lord." They were lifting up that lament. And in the power of that lament, not a single one of those kids decided to go back home. They went on to Mississippi. That's the power of emotion and the power of that medicine, the power of kumbaya. And I think that folks who want racism to continue, they saw that was power. And so they tried to make fun of it. They tried to diminish it by saying it's weak. You're not manly, or you're not, you're not a strong white person. If you're letting yourself admit that you have emotions. And so because of that, we don't have that muscle. We don't see the medicine when it's not labeled. we don't know how to cope with loss. So we anesthetize, we deny, or we dig deep and cling to some false identity of superiority that just doesn't exist. And so what I would say to the folks who look like me is to quit buying that lie. Because when you think about it in the dark of the night, when you're hurting, you know that it's not serving you. And the people that have the answer are the ones that white supremacy has told you are the ones you shouldn't listen to. Stop listening to the lie and start listening to the truth.
Ooh. Wow. Charles?
Yes. If I had to leave one piece of advice, don't let others define who you are. James Baldwin wrote, if I'm not who you say I am, you're not who you think you are. A lot of us, black, white, and different, define ourselves not by who we are, by who we are not. I'm not like him. I'm not like her. I'm not like them. They're this, they're that, they're the other. And you oftentimes buy into their labeling. Sometimes it's a method of dealing with the pain, taking ownership of a hateful term. You see that in the Black community, in the Latino community, whatever. And you go, well, yeah, I'm a thug from Compton. Because that's the popular thing, and I'm taking ownership of that. I'm making that mine. But sometimes you need to look at, what does that mean? What are you actually taking ownership of? A label that does not sit well with your spirit? Does it mean that, okay, I'm going to do this, 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 and this because that's what they expect of me? Really? And I can understand we find our ways to cope, and we find our own path in that regard. But at the same time, we owe ourselves and our loved ones, and I'm willing to go on the limb to say we owe our ancestors who died and struggled. Quietly sometimes in the street, sometimes just by doing everything it took to make sure there was food on the table and a warm house for their family. All the stuff, all the indignities they put up with, all the things they endured. And believe me, endurance is no easy thing. To have lived through life as a Black man in Southern United States, Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, Texas, to be a Latino guy in Texas in the 50s, I wouldn't pay good money for that. I mean, it's rough when Black guys are looking over there going, I think I might have to stick with Mississippi and see where this takes me. I mean, but they did all of those things, not so that we could be a bigger monster than, the ones who were terrorizing us, but so that we could be better people, so that we could live a life that is exemplary to the children who are looking up at us, even as we walk through our daily grind now. Because a child learns more from watching you and hearing you and seeing what you do than they ever do from you saying, sit down, do this or do that. They watch and they see and they internalize all of that. Sometimes we need to say, am I worthy to be this child's ancestor? Are the things I'm doing worthy enough to be exemplary? I don't have to be a millionaire, but I should be a good person. I should live a good life. Sometimes it means, you take a stand and you have to do some rough things. That's life. But the hardest thing in the world to be is a gentle spirit, because you're being assailed from all sides, from people who look like you and from people who don't. They don't know what you've been through. They don't know what your struggles have been, but they can tell you your business better than you can. But you have to keep your own counsel. You have to find out who you are and take that time to listen to those elders and listen to those ancestors, because they're going to talk to you. They are going to talk to you. Back when I worked at Jackson State, it was a doctor. And Jackson State did one of the first heart studies in the African-American community, like a 10-year study. And he was saying, I just don't understand why Black people have high rates of hypertension. And I looked at him and I said, sir, do you know what it's like to be a Black person in Mississippi? Do you know the everyday stress we are under? Of course, we're lucky we don't just explode spontaneously on the sidewalk. We have to deal with that every day. So as you point out, when COVID hit us, it had fertile ground. Our hearts were already stressed out. We had diabetes, we had high blood pressure, and COVID just jumped on top of that and stretched out.
Yeah.
But we've got to learn to take care of ourselves. And a big part of that is facing the truth of ourselves. There are a lot of people out there who play in the role. You know, I'm young, cool dude on the block. Or I'm the upwardly mobile and striding person. I'm the person who doesn't need the medicine from my past. We're playing all these different roles. But who are we supposed to be? Who are we meant to be? Who did our ancestors pass on this medicine to with the hopes that we would be? That's what we need to remember. And that's what I'd like to leave with anybody who's listening.
That's beautiful. Yeah, yeah. You know, I know your ancestors are smiling right now because both of you are truly beautiful reflections of what they struggled about, what they prayed for, what they dreamed about, you know. And, you know, I just want to thank you for all the work that you do. I want to thank you for your truth, for your perseverance, for your hard work, for you being in relation with me and this work collectively. And, you know, I want to lift up something, and I want to do it publicly for a reason. You know, Susan is writing right now. She's been contemplating a book. And so I want to lift up right now that we're going to expect a book from Dr. Glisson here. We're going to expect a book, and we need to hear. We need to hear your words. We need to hear your teachings. We need to hear your lessons. The universe needs that, but we need that. I need that. And, you know, I always talk about my grandma, and every morning she would pray, and then she would go and bless us all up. Some of us didn't have the privilege and the blessing of having a grandma that would do that for you. But I know if your grandma was here, she would bless you up. And she would bless, you know, you up, and she would bless Charles up, because both of you walk in this journey together. And she would say, do what you need to do now. Just do what you need to do, and don't worry about what people say and what people think. And I think that is one of the biggest wounds of racism, is it makes us doubt ourselves. It makes us doubt the words and the inspirations of our ancestors. And much more than that, it makes us doubt that we are as worthy as anyone else. That's the wound of racism, that we doubt, regardless of the color of our skin or where we came from, our journey, that we are sacred. And what the grandmas would say is, you are sacred that way, you know. So I want to thank both of you for this time that you've shared with me, and for the work that you do. And I'm just, you know, I'm looking forward to the continued work that we have together, you know, because we got a lot of work still to do, you know, and I can't wait till we can be together in person, so that we can, you know, embrace each other, but also, you know, have a good time. Charles mentioned have a good time. Let's listen to some music, eat some good food. And, you know, I'll tell you, I when I was in Mississippi, I ate some good food out there.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. No doubt about that. No doubt about that.
Yeah.
You may not get some things right, but we can feed the boy.
That's right.
Maestro, brother, thank you. I accept the blessing.
Yeah.
You'll see a book.
Yes. All right. So I want to just, again, thank the ancestors for stepping in and guiding us today. You know, we never know where we're going to go and what they're going to bring out. But I want to encourage you, you know, to hear the words of that have been shared today, of, you know, of each of us facing our truth, of each of us embracing even our wounds, but also of us taking on the charge and the responsibility of doing what is right, of walking our path so we can bring that sacred humanity back to this world. And sometimes it's one relationship at a time. You got somebody in your family that needs, a little bit of talking to, a little bit of blessing, a little bit of, love to get them to feel, a little bit more about the importance of honoring relationships. And so I want to thank you and invite you to, to comment and on the post here, you're going to see connections to both Charles and Susan. Look them up. You'll see the many credentials and all the tremendous work they're doing. Send them a note. Because this is not easy work, and sometimes we need those little encouragements and inspirations. But thank you all for listening, and may your ancestors bless you and have a wonderful day. Glasgow Monday. Thank you.
For more information about Healing Generations and the Healing Generations Institute, visit nationalcompadresnetwork.org and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our new releases.